Will UK property values drop as a result of coronavirus? My personal opinion is no. I'll be very, very surprised if we see any real drops anywhere. The reason for that is, I guess the reason why do people think it's going to drop? I guess the only thing they're comparing it to is the 2008 financial crisis. And the reality is we shouldn't compare it to that, because it's a whole different beast altogether. The 2008 crash was largely a direct result of economic pressures. So very, very different to what's happening now. Yes, we've got economic pressures now, but it's not. It's a whole different beast. In addition, the other one of the major reasons was due to banks' irresponsible lending pre-2008, and obviously since then, the banks, governments, borrowers, everybody's learned a lot of lessons, a lot of very valuable lessons. Obviously, back in pre-2008, banks were lending 125% loan to values on any property in any areas. It was just a bit of a, it didn't have a structure that you have in place now. Banks are stress testing things now to make sure that people aren't going to default, because they don't want to repossess properties, because they're in the business of lending money. They're not in the business of selling properties. So they want to lend responsibly, and they want to keep people in those properties. And the other things that are happening now is, the markets are still moving. People are still buying. Overseas investors, the savvy ones, are seeing this as a huge opportunity. The pound is at a record low. Interest rates are at record lows. So the smart investors, and this is the same thing that happened after the crash, the smart investors are getting into the market now, because now is the time. Give it a year or 2 years, the markets will start to boom again. People will, when everything's settled down, people will start to be buying, and that's going to force the prices up. So those investors that get in now are going to do very well. The other reason why markets are still going to keep moving now is because of, things like people have to move, still need to move. People might move for jobs, even though there's job uncertainty. Obviously less so now with the new measures that the government has introduced this week. People still need to move for their jobs. People still get married. People still expand their families, so they need more space. People get divorced, so they need to move out and find other properties. People die, so those properties need to be sold, or people move into them. All these things happen, and they're still happening, and these things move the housing market around and round. And we can also look at the number of transactions that has been occurring in the last year or so, or the last 3 years even, throughout the Brexit negotiations. That's another thing. Obviously, huge uncertainty surrounding Brexit, but number of transactions was still incredibly high, and property prices carried on rising. So I think the reality is, the UK is still a hugely undersupplied market. And the knock-on that we're going to face now is that the rate in which new homes are being built is going to slow. The getting the materials, getting the workers on site, all of these things is going to take that little bit longer. I'm not suggesting that developments are going to take longer to be completed, but talking about new housing estates, for example, brand new from the ground up buildings where you have to bring in the new facilities and foundations, everything. All this is going to take that little bit longer, which is also going to add to the pressures on the housing market. So the opportunities really are in getting into properties that are already existing, or things that are permitted development schemes that are very quick to turn around, easy for developers to complete, and investors, if they're buying in the right locations. Big opportunity, getting back to it, like I said, low interest rates, a very good exchange rate at the minute for the overseas investors. So now is the time to get into the market and start making some money.